Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first Ateneos panel for fourth year, a space for academic exchange, where our students present the work they have developed as part of the course. Today, we'll hear 3 presentations that explore diverse and timely topics, from the intersection of innovative pedagogies and emotional learning to the cinematic adaptation of literary genders, and the use of fanfiction as a tool for second language acquisition. Each presentation will last at a maximum of 13 minutes, between 11 and 13 minutes. And at the end, if time allows, we'll open a brief space for questions or comments. Okay, let us begin. I'm going to introduce our first presenter, Micaela Carmona. Micaela invites us to reflect on how project-based learning can be integrated with social and emotional development in educational settings. Her analysis draws on recent literature and practical experiences that highlight the transformative potential of this pedagogical combination. So we welcome Micaela, and we're all ears.
I'll share with you my paper, Exploring the Intersection of Project-Based Learning and Social and Emotional Learning, Compatibility and Effectiveness. Introduction. In the modern era where evolution is rapid and constant, innovative educational practices must evolve and meet the needs of societal changes as well. Project-based learning and social and emotional learning have proven to be 2 effective approaches to teaching, which clearly meet the 21st century needs. In the past, students' education concerned them as individuals. However, their present times demand a shift in focus to teach students valuable assets for community learning. The aforementioned teaching approaches have gained popularity among educators. The application of each approach in the classroom has demonstrated favorable results in students' learning processes. The best schools foster students' academic, social, and emotional competencies. Nevertheless, it has now been studied the application of both in practice. These approaches share similar goals that combined can provide even better results in the learning process. The exposed literature proves if there is a possibility of joining these approaches to benefit students and provide a better learning outcome, because when schools promote students' academic, social, and emotional learning, students will possess the basic competencies, work habits, and values for the future. Objectives. This article aims to explore 2 teaching approaches: project-based learning, from now on PBL, and social and emotional learning, from now on SEL. The writing considers how PBL naturally fosters LCL skills like self-regulation, empathy, and collaboration. The article focuses specifically on this last ability mentioned. Similarly, this article intends to expose the possible tensions between these 2 approaches and how they can be resolved. The information shared may possibly provide new insights on compatible approaches for a richer learning outcome. Methodology. To accomplish the objectives earlier mentioned, this paper exposes existing literature on the topics, including case studies and academic articles debating the thematic concerns of the essays. Similarly, such information is compared and discussed in order to reach an understanding of the topic displayed. To explore such information, a descriptive approach is applied in the paper in order to investigate the concerns addressed in the objectives. Analysis. John Dewey's educational philosophy originated several instructional approaches. One of those is PBL, project-based learning. This approach involves students in academic tasks to be answered in small groups to reach a collective outcome, which permits educators to work interdisciplinarily. PBL places a student as the center of the learning, instead of this being the learning contest, as traditional learning approaches do. The literature consulted proves that PBL provides students with authentic learning. Suárez conducted a study on this issue among university students, which resulted in confirming PBL was perceived as a personally more meaningful learning experience in comparison with other teaching methods. Despite its right outcome in students, PBL implies some challenges during the resolution of the task. In another case study conducted in 2 high schools that use this approach, David et al. Argue about the possible intragroup conflicts present in the PBL projects. These authors' study points out that it is more important to have social skills as a group than to have them individually. This could be the key to preventing or diminishing conflicts in PBL projects. Another approach that arises from this philosophy is social and emotional learning. Weisberg and Gascarino state that social and emotional learning concern the acquisition and adequate application of knowledge, attitudes, and skills to understand and manage emotion, set and achieve goals, among other favorable outcomes. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning identify 5 competencies central to SEL: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. For such an integral set of abilities, many educators claim that SEL should be promoted and integrated into school curriculum. John's study on promoting this teaching approach provides solid evidence that a variety of SEL programs can build important social skills in middle school. When it comes to fostering useful skills for future in the classroom, educators must contemplate the ability to collaborate. Collaboration is core to social interactions in adult life. That is why students should learn to acquire this ability throughout their school years. Collaborative learning is aligned with John Dewey's theory of learning by being part of the surrounding community and the world. It is common to confuse cooperative learning and collaborative learning. Rebecca Oxford defined the first as socially constructive exchange of information in which students' own learning is motivated by others' learning. In contrast, collaborative learning helps students to become members of knowledge communities. Both learnings are, however, given hand in hand for a richer outcome. Collaborative tasks are generally integrated into classroom group activities, but they tend to be short activities that are not assessed, which hinders students' track of this skill. The approaches explain shared learning outcome, collaborating with peers to reach a common goal. While PBL fosters the practical abilities for group work and task resolution, SEL provides students with skills to manage properly the challenges of teamwork. The integration of both approaches in the classroom could enrich students' learning outcome and strengthen their collaborative skills. Research has not shown whether PBL and SEL can be joined in a lesson plan, or if it would be more appropriate to plan projects separately from the skills to be fostered in the classroom in order to accomplish better results. By integrating these theories, educators can better justify an instructional design where projects serve not only cognitive goals, but also the cultivation of social skills like empathy, self-management, responsibility, and most importantly, collaboration. There are, however, several difficulties in applying more than one teaching approach in the classroom. On the one hand, students are mostly used to traditional teaching in the classroom. Generally, applying unconventional approaches in the classroom can discomfort students. On the other hand, applying project-based learning and social and emotional learning at once implies a challenge while planning a lesson. Although PBL and SEL appear to be compatible and easy to implement in a lesson plan, teachers might not be prepared to integrate the best of both approaches at once. Teacher preparation would then be needed to combine training on PBL and SEL practices. Thus, the implementation of these approaches together would not only be a challenge for students, but also for teachers. Translating the theoretical match between PBL and SEL into classroom practice requires new strategies for their effective application. One effective strategy is to design an integrated project unit to join academic objectives and SEL competencies. Similarly, it will be valuable to include checkpoints to measure students' accomplishments towards the project's goal. Likewise, assessments should address PBL and SEL's objectives, for which rubrics can be used to measure collaboration. Evaluating, for example, active listening and problem solving. Considering this possible application, PBL can become a natural context for daily SEL practice instead of additions to a traditional teaching program. Final thoughts. The analysis of project-based learning and social and emotional learning underscores their shared commitment to preparing students for the complicated demands of contemporary life. PBL's emphasis on group problem solving and collaborative production of a solution naturally complements SEL's focus on social competencies like relationship skills and responsibility. Together, the approaches can cultivate informed learners who are also capable of collaborative actions. Integrating these approaches is more than just a simple classroom choice. It may represent a shift in educational priorities. By embedding SEL skills into project work, schools beckon that interpersonal growth and emotional well-being are as critical as academic achievement, which would align with UNESCO 21st century global skills. This may as well prepare students with practical skills that extend beyond school life into civic life, workspace, and personal relationships. Future research should explore in depth the effects of combining PBL and SEL in the curricula, examining academic outcomes, as well as some behavioral indicators, such as improved peer relationships, problem-solving among groups, or engagement in collaborative learning. In conclusion, the convergence of PBL and SEL offers an integrative perspective on education. When consciously and properly implemented, it could transform classrooms into improved learning spaces, ensuring that students acquire academic contents, grow as competent thinkers, but also as collaborative learners ready to navigate adult work in the 21st century.
Thank you. So guys, feel free to take notes and perhaps make some comments afterwards. We're going to go on with the next presentation. There is no need to rush, just doing, yeah, you're doing very well. So we're going to go on with Lucía Cáceres. Lucía explores, I cannot see some of you because of the camera. Lucía explores the challenges and strategies involved in adapting epistolary novels to the cinematic language. Her presentation analyzes specific cases and proposes narrative tools to preserve the essence of the genre on screen. So we welcome Lucía, and we're all ears again. Go ahead. Sorry, we are going to share the presentation. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah. How do we make it? Yeah. There we go.
Good morning. I will be reading my paper, From Journal to Shots, Strategies for Adapting the Epistolary Novel into Film. Introduction. Adaptation has always been at the heart of cinema. From its earliest days, literature has served as a source for inspiration for a number of filmmakers. By 1899, George Méliès was already experimenting with narrative storytelling on screen. And that same year saw the first Shakespeare play, King John, transferred to film. Within just a few years, narrative structures dominated the screen. When considering epistolary novels, which are narrative structures around letters or other written documents, adaptations present a distinct theoretical challenge. Built from private texts and fragmented voices, the epistolary form relies on the intimacy and subjectivity of the narrator, and what happens when such a form moves from page to screen. Film, as a medium built on images and sound, does not usually lend itself naturally to fragmented documents or inner voices. So how does one turn the intimacy of a diary entry into a shared cinematic experience? How can a variety of voices become a film's narrative structure? Adaptations have constantly wrestled with these questions, and these are the questions that frame this paper. The aim is, through a qualitative and theoretical approach, to explore the strategies that filmmakers employ when coming face-to-face with this form. The epistolary novel, form and functions. The epistolary novel is one of literature's most distinctive forms, often defined not by a single narrator, but by a collection of private voices, letters, diary entries, newspaper clippings, and other documents that stitch the story together. What makes it compelling is not only the content of these documents, but the illusion they create. The reader has access to something private, something not originally meant to be shared. It thus creates a sense of intimacy between reader and narrator. We experience the story as if overhearing personal exchanges, fostering an emotional connection and sympathy for the narrator. The roots of the genre can be traced back to early uses of correspondence in literature, with a significant development in the 17th and 18th centuries, when writing novels in the form of letters became a well-established tradition in European literature. The form quickly gained popularity for its ability to simulate real-life communication. This invited the characters' voices and personalities to show on the page. What sets the epistolary form apart is its structure, built entirely from the characters' own words without the mediation of an external narrator. This is both an advantage and a limitation. On the one hand, it frees the author from long descriptions, allowing events to be retold through the subjective perspective of the characters. On the other hand, it leaves much of the action off stage, requiring the reader to reconstruct the gaps between the documents. It is their job to piece together this kind of fragmented story. Beyond its structure, the epistolary form also offers a unique way of exploring multiple characters, which can create a polyphonic effect. Each letter or entry offers a distinct perspective. This multiplicity of voices often results in different interpretations of the same events, making the narration a clearly subjective and rather unreliable. In many cases, characters can also turn to letters or diaries as ways of coping with isolation and loneliness, reinforcing the sense of longing for a connection. They can also center on love, relationships, and heartbreak, while also diving into social and political issues. The range is broad. This composition of intimacy, multiplicity, and fragmentation that the epistolary form presents is precisely what defines it, and as later sections argue, what makes it so difficult to translate into film. The question for filmmakers then is not how to copy this form, but how to evoke its effects, how to translate the intimacy of the private letter or diary into the shared space of the big screen. Adaptation and fidelity. Literature and film speak different languages. There is no denying that. It is only natural then that in the process of adaptation, something might get lost in translation. Throughout its history, the concept of adaptation has stood as synonym for bad. Author Stamp, quoted from Snyder, introduced the notion of adaptation as a parasite that drained the life of a literary work. Primera notes that the field primarily brought together literature and film scholars who insisted that adaptations were more than lamentably unfaithful or vulgar versions of literature. The primary idea is that an adaptation can never reach the mighty standards of literature in any of its forms. For one, it cannot, but not because adaptations are bad, but because they can never be exactly like the stories they are based on. The nature of adaptation implies a transformation. Originally a scientific term, it referred to the process of applying one thing to another to produce change. Later, in the 19th century, the term began to be defined as an altered or amended version of a text, adapted for filming, broadcasting, or production on the stage. Therefore, adaptation studies have long moved beyond the old debate of fidelity versus betrayal. As Stam argues, a film adaptation as copy is not necessarily inferior to the novel as original. So now, contemporary theory treats adaptation as a form of intertextuality, a dialogue between texts, genres, and media. Linda Hutchen famously describes adaptation as repetition without copy. For her, every adaptation carries value in its act of reinterpretation. This means that an adapted film should not be judged as a failed replica of the source, but as a creative rewriting that finds new ways to communicate the spirit of the original. If we take this framework to the practice of adaptation of epistolary novels, it is logical that a few doubts may surge. If the epistolary form's defining features, intimacy, authenticity, polyphony, fragmentation, cannot be transferred as a whole into the screen, then how does it do it? Adaptation then must focus on translating these functions. Fidelity in this sense becomes less about copying words and more about reimagining an experience. Cinematic strategies for epistolary adaptation. We have been mentioning how critics have often assumed that novels are inherently more complex than films, privileging art in fiction. How the novel is treated as a norm to which film must adhere. Yet, as it has been stated, to demand sameness is to miss what makes each medium unique. One of the clearest ways to adapt letters or journals would be voice-over narration, as it preserves the intimate, first-person perspective that defines epistolary writing. This technique relies on an off-screen narrator, as Jan denotes, whose voice tells the story without being physically present in the scene. It is especially powerful in homodiegetic narratives, where the narrator is also a character within the story, experiencing the events firsthand. Jan calls this I-I structure, which creates a subtle distance, both temporal and psychological, between the present self retelling the story and the past self reliving it. This frames the story as a journey. The character reflects on the actions we see unfolding on the screen. Through this voiceover, films do not only allow audiences to have a direct access to the character's inner thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, the way a reader would experience in a personal letter or a journal, but also they translate the written word of the novel to images on the screen, mixing what we see with what we hear. This way, it preserves the essence of epistolary writing while also letting the film speak in its own cinematic language. Jan refers to the filmic composition device, or FCD, as the creative intelligence that orchestrates a film's visuals and sounds, using camera angles, shot distances, and editing to guide the audience's attention and maintain the movie's narrative flow. For example, varying shot distances control what viewers focus on and how much detail they see. Extreme close-ups highlight key objects. Close-ups reveal characters' reactions, medium and full shots show interaction or context, and long shots establish the setting. Camera angles also shape perception and focus. Higher or low angles can emphasize vulnerability or power, while tilted or oblique angles suggest tension. Cuts and transitions manage how the story unfolds. Fades or dissolves, for instance, might indicate a shift to the past tense, as if the character were experiencing a flashback. Editing integrates visuals with sound, such as voiceover narration or music, to convey a specific mood and multiple perspectives. Together, these elements allow the FCD, the filmic composition device, to translate the private, reflective nature of letters and journals into film. In the end, their adaptation is about letting it speak a new language, one made of images, sound, and cinematic rhythm. The filmmaker is not recreating the novel, they are reinterpreting it, finding ways for the epistolary form to keep on living in film. Conclusion. Adapting an epistolary novel is never a matter of simple translation. Letters and diaries carry a certain intimacy that define their literary power, and these qualities might easily slip away when it comes to the passing of words to image. Yet, as this paper has shown, filmmakers have a rich arsenal of tools for conveying said effects. Whether through narration, visual effects, or sound, they allow cinema to echo the subjective, personal experience of reading private texts. The challenge of adapting letters or journals is also an opportunity. It invites filmmakers to think creatively about the effect of the epistolary form and to remind audiences that cinema, like literature, has its own capacity to move, surprise, evoke feelings. In this sense, adaptation is not a test of fidelity, but a dialogue, a chance for one medium to converse with another. This way, the epistolary form does not vanish in film, it mutates.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucía. Thank you so much. Well, we're going to move on now, but before that, I need to share another presentation. Check. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go on with Martina Suárez. Martina investigates how reading and writing fan fiction can become an effective path for acquiring a second language. Her work is supported by recent studies and testimonies from informal learning communities. Welcome, Martina, and you can get started.
Thank you all for being here. I will now read my name. The pursuit of proficiency in a second language, such as English, is linked to traditional classroom settings and structured curricula that students know by heart. Nevertheless, in the digital age, new possibilities for authentic and motivated language acquisition happen outside institutional walls, and it is here that the world of fanfiction comes into play. We can define fanfiction as writing that continues, interrupts, reimagines, or riffs on stories and characters other people have already written about, which gives fans the possibility of expanding pre-existing narratives and creating communities that revolve around mutual passions. Despite fanfiction being originally categorized as marginal, contemporary scholars now comprehend it as a collaborative practice with educational value. For English language learners, especially adolescents, participating in these online fan communities while simultaneously writing and reading fanfiction provides them with a profound context for English language socialization and compelling input, apart from relevant and virtual opportunities for language use beyond the classroom. Today, my aim is to briefly explain how it is that engaging with fanfiction can foster second language acquisition in English. Drawing on theories from fan studies and motivation research, I argue that the participatory notions of fanfiction offer users dynamic opportunities for them to turn into confident producers of content in the English language. The F in fanfiction is for fandom. Before diving into how fanfiction can be employed as a language learning tool, let us consider the broader cultural framework from which it arises, fandom. Throughout history, fandom was often stigmatized, perceived as a pathology, fanatical devotion, or even a form of obsession. Early uses of the word fan derive from fanatic, from the Latin fanaticus, which makes allusion to a religious and later a political zealot. Still, the word fan also seems to originate from the fancy, a more benign English sporting team from the early 1800s, to refer to those who shared a preference for a competitor and appeared in everything from pigeon racing to boxing, suggesting irrational and excessive devotion. According to Cavici, over the past several decades, the nature of fandom's extraordinariness has undergone significant changes, largely due to the development of the internet and digital production. Nowadays, academics from various fields acknowledge fandom as a vibrant and lively space that contributes to culture, fosters collaboration, and promotes participatory engagement. The rise of mass media has led to fan practices becoming increasingly visible and accepted in our 21st century society. Song and Choi have described fandom as the emotional attachment to media personas and the formation of communities based on shared affection. Bliss accurately states that when fans exist within fandoms, they exist with their own unique culture. The truth is that fandoms encompass more than shared interests. They are networks of individuals who construct their own cultural practices, terminologies, and identities by connecting with each other. Jenkins brings the participatory dimension of fandom to the forefront, arguing that fans are not passive consumers, but active producers, since they create participatory cultures as a collective endeavor. It is within these communities that fans share and reinterpret works from the media, sustaining their relevance and transforming them in the process. Out of this participatory environment, fanfiction has proved to be for fans the most popular way of concretizing and disseminating their passion for a particular fictional universe. When writing fanfiction, fans can even get feedback on their stories, challenging the boundaries between authors and readers, creation and interpretation. Fanfiction is much more than the writing and reading of made-up stories, since it allows fans from all over the world to engage in online discussions regarding their topics of interest. All in all, fandom is the community-driven space where cultural engagement, identity, and creativity merge together, giving way in some cases to fanfiction. For English language learners, stepping into this collaborative world means entering spaces where English serves as both the shared lingua franca and the medium of expression amongst users, broadening the communicative possibilities within fan communities. Fanfiction and language learning in informal contexts. Research on online fanfiction writing practices among second language and bilingual writers has examined the many ways in which online environments can support informal learning. This practice is often referred to as learning in the digital wilds, that is, digital spaces, communities, and networks that are independent of formal instructional contexts. In these virtual spaces, literacy practices unfold outside of institutional settings, while still being rich in terms of educational potential. What fanfiction does is that it directly connects reading and writing. Readers of fanfiction may later become writers to reach a wider audience by reworking narratives and experimenting with different styles. In the process of reviewing the scholarly attention paid to fanfiction, Suárez found that case studies show major improvements in both reading and writing skills, not only in fans' first languages, but also in additional languages. The Archive of Our Own, also known as AO3, is one of the largest platforms for fanfiction, and it helps illustrate the significance of these fan practices. It hosts more than 6.5 million words, and yet a substantial proportion of the words on AO3 are in English, with nearly 6 million of those 6.5 million words achieved there published in English. Alongside Angelina Karpovic, who stated that a large number of these fans are not native speakers of English, Rebecca Black was one of the first to study this phenomenon, claiming that a substantial part of the fanfiction readership is now composed of English language learners and users of English as a second language. The interesting thing about AO3 is that it allows readers to experiment with English in a context that is not an educational one. This way, they feel prompted to create personal and creative productions that come from their passion rather than obligation, and therefore, fanfiction ends up becoming an informal, yet surprisingly motivating space for language acquisition, as a consequence of learners not being restricted by rigid curricula. Motivation, identity, and community. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of fanfiction for language learners is its connection to motivation. Scholars recognize the conception of fanfiction as a form of extensive reading that is highly motivating, as it is connected to matters of individual and collective identity. Motivation has long been identified as central in the process of mastering the acquisition of a second language. Although beginner learners may face what Cody calls the beginner paradox of not possessing enough vocabulary to push for instances of extensive reading, fanfiction functions as an environment where motivation and interest meet to help fans overcome such usual barriers. In some cases, the bond created between fandom narratives and fans is so strong that it manages to outweigh the linguistic difficulties that may arise along the way, which is how learners persist even when met with unfamiliar words or structures they had not come across before. So what role does identity play in all this? Online fanfiction communities are valuable spaces of learning because they feature numerous discussions in which both meaning and identity are negotiated. Fans' choices of characters, tropes, and writing styles are all ways of showing their own identities, and at the same time, the use of English itself becomes a marker of belonging within global fan cultures. English comes to be more than just a school subject. It is no longer just about passing exams or getting a good grade. It's about having the confidence to put the language they know to use in real life for their own purposes. Moreover, the feedback writers get from their online communities further reinforces both their motivation and identities. Most readers choose to leave comments, suggestions, and encouragement, providing those who create works and fanfiction with authentic interaction in English. These instances of peer-to-peer exchange reenact classroom feedback, even though it happens to carry more meaning, given that it unfolds authentically within users who share the same passion. Challenges and critical perspectives. Without disregarding its potential, viewing fanfiction as a possible tool for language learning presents certain challenges. On one hand, some fans are reluctant to the incorporation of fan practices into formal educational contexts, because doing so would strip them of total authenticity. As Micaela noted, for many writers, fanfiction belongs within its own cultural ecosystem, and transplanting it into the classroom and domesticating it could violate community norms. Furthermore, questions of linguistic correctness can also generate tensions. Fanfiction supposes creativity and narrative experimentation, but it sometimes enters a conflict with the prescriptive and normative views of language learning. Learners may acquire fluency and confidence, but still, they may continue to reproduce non-standard forms they have either learned or read online, which raises questions regarding the correct balance between communicative effectiveness and more formal traditional accuracy. In relation to issues of access and equity, it is also a possibility that not all learners have the digital literacy or connectivity required to accordingly take part in these online fanfiction spaces. What should be noticed about this limitation is that while fanfiction is a formidable resource for L2 acquisition, its role must be understood and viewed with a critical eye. Pedagogical implications. We as teachers might encourage students to explore narratives they are passionate about, or to experiment with writing exercises that mirror fan fiction remixing of pre-existing works of fiction. Rather than requiring participation in fan communities, educators can draw on the foundations of participatory culture, which encompass collaboration, creativity, and passionate engagement. If teachers are willing to acknowledge the value of learners' interest, they might be able to bridge the gap between classroom instruction and digital participation, not only enhancing motivation but also validating students' identity as users of English outside the classroom. Final thoughts. Fan fiction, which is born out of fandom's interactive and collaborative culture, proposes a distinctive pathway for second language acquisition. It is far from being marginal. It represents a mighty side of literacy development, identity work, and language exchange, making it a powerful complement to formal education. Still, the challenges remain, specifically regarding linguistic correctness, accessibility, and the integration of these fan practices into formal contexts of instruction. Even so, both educators and researchers have the chance of recognizing fan fiction as more than a mere hobby done at home.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Micaela, Lucía, Martina, for your presentations. What you have just experienced is an Ateneos panel, and what they have been doing is reading their journals. This is the last activity we have usually in Ateneos is fourth year, and the journal is that the perspective of an expert who has been studying on a topic. They have been studying on this, and they have chosen a tiny, topic within their area of studies to share with the audience. And the idea is that after reading, because this is what experts do in an Ateneos, it's not that we have been lazy, by reading out loud what they have been researching on. The idea is that you get that feeling that there is a new topic that you haven't heard about and that you would like to hear more or read more, and there should be references. I'm sorry, I forgot to share your references before at the end, so you know where to resort to, or afterwards, in this social part of an Ateneos, you can reach and access the expert and ask questions, about that topic. So I hope that you have enjoyed it. Does anyone have any comments? I'm sorry, but I cannot. Do you have any comments, any questions, anything you would like to add? You're being very nice. Come on, no? Really?
It's like we don't know each other.
Okay. You have been a very nice audience, and this is
Any questions?
it's the first time you're opening Ateneos to the rest of the students. Thank you so much. I'm sure you don't have any questions. Yeah, okay.
I would like to make a comment on the presentations. Voice, eye contact, and pace do make a difference. So that is something that you need to bear in mind.
Absolutely. Yes, because that's all you got when you're reading. Yes, that's something very, very hard to achieve. You have done a very good job. So thank you. Thank you so much for being such a friendly audience. Okay? I'm going to stop recording here, and gracias, Maria. Thank you so much.